A journey can be many things. It can be as simple as a movement from one place to another, brightly colored by the passage in between. It can be a test, one of strength and iron will, only to be completed by one with steely determination and a fire in their belly. Or in those special times, when the rails glimmer, when the smoke licks your nose and the sharp blast of a far-off whistle causes ghosts of a bygone era to begin to stir. It's then when a simple journey can truly take us back in time.
There's a trend in tourism that people don't just want to take a train ride, they want to experience it. They want to learn about it. People want now to see things because they've been warned that they may be gone, and in fact they are leaving.
From the days when it was a fur trading post, Kamloops, BC has prided itself on being a transportation hub. It's no surprise then that Kamloops is a major vantage point for historic travel experiences, and none more spectacular than the Kamloops Heritage Railway.
Within Kamloops, there's a lot of railway history. A lot of people have some deep ties to the railway.
Railway fans, young and old, can now climb aboard a nearly century-old steam train and chug across a vintage railroad bridge for a short afternoon excursion, and maybe even a train robbery. Or they may choose to climb the steep grade to Monty Lake and descend into the ranching valleys of Westwold and Falkland for an entrancing day-long return run to Armstrong.
The ability to go through the train now and see the kids smiling, see adults reliving travel from the past, being able to tell their kids, you know, this is how Grandma and Grandpa immigrated, that is so rewarding. And when you're riding the train, I can understand the romance and mystique that people must have felt about rail travel.
These glimpses of a bygone era of steam travel are the result of tremendous volunteer dedication, community support, and determination to preserve BC history. And at the heart of it all is the venerable 2141 steam engine.
Well, the boys knew what they were doing. We just had a little bit of fire trial there, and once you got a fire in her, they took her from there.
When she chugged onto the tracks under her own power for the first time in 40 years, it was the culmination of over 8 years and 80,000 hours of volunteer labor.
Whenever you've got a 1912 engine huffing and puffing and the rods moving and people can look at it, it's tangible. As soon as it became tangible, you could see it there working and steaming. From then on, it was going to be hard to stop this project.
The people who were working on it always knew that it would go. When we had it completely torn apart, the wheels off, the cab was off, all the boiler jacket was off, all the tubes were out. We'd have open houses there and people would come and say, "Oh, you guys will never get this back together again."
Consolidation Locomotive 2141 started her days at the Canadian Locomotive Company in Kingston, Ontario. She was one of 25 built and is the only survivor of her class. Her early years were spent hauling freight and passengers on the prairies, first between Calgary and Saskatoon for the Canadian Northern Railway, and then across Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta for the Canadian National Railway. Her last few years saw her working on Vancouver Island, hauling logs and other freight between Victoria and Cowichan Bay.
It's a mid-sized locomotive, so it would have operated not much more than 50 or 75 miles away from its base. The idea was that it would be a feeder, bringing rail cars to the main line, where a much larger locomotive would then take it down east or west, north or south, depending on where you were. It's about 1,600 horsepower, and they would refer to that now as something like a switching engine. It's a A 280, and in that configuration, it's able to take quite sharp corners, work in the yard.
The engine itself weighs about 95 tons. The tender carries 6,000 gallons of water and 3,000 gallons of fuel. When working hard, it can go about 50 miles between water fill-ups and 125 miles before needing more fuel. Her last trip, before being replaced by a diesel locomotive, was on July 4th, 1958, from Cowichan Bay to Victoria. She was then slated for demolition, but Mayor Jack Fitzwater of Kamloops had other ideas.
The 2141 was lined up with all the others ready for the scrap heap, and it was just through the forward thinking and the vision of a mayor at the time that he selected that one and secured it from CN for $2,000 and had it brought up to Kamloops, placed in the park.
On October 28, 1961, the 2141 was put on display in Riverside Park. Generations of Kamloops children played on the big engine, sitting in the cab and pretending to thunder down the track. Eventually, 33 years of weather and vandalism took their toll on 2141. In 1993, the city was approached by a group seeking to purchase and restore a steam train to run in Alberta. When local rail enthusiasts got wind of this, an emergency meeting was held to explore ways to keep the engine in Kamloops.
In January of '94, they called a meeting in town. There was 60 people showed up.
Ad in the paper, anybody interested in steam, come on down to the meeting. And I got steam in my blood, so I was at the meeting. That's why I got involved.
On February 11, 1994, the 2141 Steam Locomotive Restoration Society was formed. The group of volunteers was determined that 2141 would run again. But this locomotive had last seen maintenance in 1961. How likely was it that 15 to 20 people in limited quarters with minimal funds could get it going? The volunteers stuck to their plan. They brought their own tools, lathes, presses, saws, and hoists into the shop and began to work.
We started right from making the drawings off the old wooden cab and manufacturing a new one. And it was incredible. And it gave the guys a real focus, you know. It was really neat to see it all starting to come together. But it did take time. It wasn't an easy job, that's for sure.
They planned to restore and modernize the engine. It was a monumental task.
The wheels, we had to take the wheels off, and we had this jacked up probably 8 feet in the air because all the wheels had to be rolled out from underneath the locomotive. Most people think that this is all just one piece of metal, but it's not. These have tires, just the way your car has a tire. The locomotive has a tire, and this is the tire here. And the old tires on the locomotive were below condemning limits. They were too thin here, so we had to have these replaced. These were produced in a shop in Pennsylvania and shipped to us. And then we had a machine shop in Cache Creek put them on for us. And the way they put it on is that they're heated up, and once the metal is heated, it expands. And so you have that whole ring that's expanded, and once the right temperature is met, tires just pressed onto the wheel, and as it cools, it shrinks right on and it stays on.
Volunteers, both male and female, contributed whatever skills they had. Some were former railwaymen, not surprising in a railway town, but there were also school teachers, an energy consultant, and even a chef. Local railway employees and management contributed technical help. Ongoing consultation with the CNR ensured that everything was done to standard. The community began to believe in 2141.
The City of Kamloops has been tremendous supporters for this whole operation. They gave us grants for the first 8 years to rebuild it, and we still get some operating grants from the city to keep our rail tour operation going.
There were some Cinderella moments. The original brass bell was discovered in a Kamloops scrapyard. The missing authentic whistle just showed up. Eventually, 2141 was rebuilt to modern specifications, and it was time for inspection. On January 15, 2002, 8 years and over 80,000 hours of labor later, the 2141 was under her own steam power for the first time since 1958. The city of Kamloops provided a new 5,000 square foot building to house and maintain the steam locomotive. And over 2,000 feet of track and switches were built to connect the back shop to the CN-Okanagan subdivision line. But there's more. A train requires more than a locomotive, it needs cars. 2 old flat cars were stripped. Benches were constructed, bolted down, and the sides of both cars fitted with railings to give passengers a glorious 360-degree view. A vintage caboose and second coach car followed suit. The Kamloops Heritage Railway was now open for business.
I used to ride to my uncle's farm in the Kootenays on the Kettle Valley Railway on the steam locomotive, you know, and it was just the thing that you did, and you never thought about it. And now young kids can see a steam locomotive operating. Really catch the fascination of young kids and older kids too.
It all started with the Spirit of Kamloops Heritage Steam Train Rail Tour. A 7-mile round trip taking just over an hour to complete.
All aboard!
Departing from the restored 1927 CN station near downtown Kamloops, the 2141 train makes its way across the South Thompson River, over a 1927 steel trestle bridge, and soon passes a native cemetery dating back to the late 1800s. Historic St. Joseph's Church and lush green fields with horses line the right-of-way as the train reaches the return point of the trip. Traveling back past the station, the train manager secures train orders with the use of a message hoop. The message brings a warning. Masked riders have been seen in the area and the train must proceed with caution. Suddenly, as the train passes a copse of trees, there's the unmistakable sound of pounding hoofs and gunfire. Masked ruffians on fast horses gallop out of concealment and bring the train to a halt. Again, it's history in action. The gentleman bandit Billy Miner has struck again. On May 8, 1906, Billy, Louis Calhoun, and Shorty Dunn robbed the CPR train 16 miles east of Kamloops. It was the second train robbery in Canada, the first having been carried out 3 years earlier on the coast by Billy. In the end, the men rode away with $15 and a package of liver pills. They'd been hoping for more. Bill Miner, the man who carried out the only 2 train robberies in Canada's history, may not have been successful. But he continues to ride alongside his new partner, a revitalized old steam engine, looking for that one big payday.
We've added some special theme trips, our ghost trains, our Christmas lights train, or the Spirit of Christmas train. And now in 2005, we operated our first Armstrong Explorers, which are that longer trip. So we have this menu of trips now, shorter, longer, themed, targeting the tourists in the summer, trying to build into the shoulder seasons to be a year-round operation.
When snow falls, the steam surrounding the 2141 becomes illuminated by hundreds of brightly colored lights, and guests are welcome to board and travel with the Kamloops Heritage Railway to bring Santa Claus back to Kamloops, joined by Mrs. Claus, the elves, a winter princess, and of course Frosty the Snowman. It's a great way to start the holiday season. These short trips and other themed events generated an amazing response from both locals and visitors from all parts of the globe. But the Kamloops Heritage Railway had bigger dreams.
Back in 1993, there was a general feeling that it would be restored to operating condition and that it would pull passengers at some point in the region.
In 2004, the final piece of the puzzle was put in place.
When it came to getting access to go onto the track to Armstrong, that was a four-year effort.
The objective was much more than just finding a longer run for the Heritage Steam Train. It was about creating the perfect opportunity for passengers to slide back into a historical era when steam was king, and local townsfolk who had business in the Okanagan towns of Vernon or Kelowna thought nothing of grabbing the train to get to their destination quickly and comfortably.
When you see a small child and I asked, "Is this your first time on a train?" And he goes, "Yes." And then right behind him his dad says, "It's my first time on a train too." You know that you've brought something back to life for people that who knows how long it can last in today's world. And when we see that we've brought these opportunities to people, very rewarding. Well, railway stations were always the center or the hub of activity in any of the towns built along them. And really, most towns were built along the railways. Telegraph offices were there, and there would be a potbelly stove and a pot of coffee, and if you wanted to catch up on the news, the newspapers would be there, tossed off as a bundle or tossed on as a bundle, and it was not just a center of activity for the locals, but for business as well.
On the 15th of February 1926, a daily passenger service commenced between Kamloops and Kelowna. Trains in those days consisted of a baggage car, an express car for perishable food items that needed to be delivered immediately, 2 or 3 coaches, a buffet lounge car, and 1 or 2 sleeping cars for passengers carrying on through to Vancouver or Blue River. Newspaper accounts advertised one-way fares from Armstrong to Kamloops of $2.75. helpfully comparing them to fares from Kamloops to Vancouver of $12.80.
All aboard!
It was the heyday of steam engine travel. Eventually, times changed, and the steam locomotives that worked the Kamloops to Kelowna run gave way to a steadily improving highway system. In October 1963, rail passenger service was discontinued on the Okanagan subdivision. Today, freight traffic continues to run, shuttling back and forth between Vernon and Kamloops. These days, though, they are occasionally obliged to share the track with an eastbound steam, leaving Kamloops headed for Armstrong on a journey back in time. When you board the sleeping dragon that is the 2141, your senses tell you that this will be a truly magical journey. This 115-mile round trip features spectacular scenery from the golden ranchlands of the North Thompson River to the lush green vineyards of the South Okanagan Valley. Nowadays, passengers enjoy the sights and sounds as the 2141 valiantly climbs the 2% grade out of Campbell Creek, working hard under her power alone, pushing towards the summit. You can see the black smoke billowing from her stack and feel the thumping of the drivers echoing throughout the hills. After traveling through a 493-foot tunnel, she sets into a unique mile-long, half-mile-deep horseshoe curve. The summit of the line is finally reached at Monty Lake, just over 16 miles from the Campbell Creek departure point. At the outfall of Monty Lake, the train crosses Highway 97 for the first time and heads out onto the flat and wide plain at Westwold. The valleys are devoted to farming, most of which center around cattle ranching. During the rail boom, the Okanagan subdivision was home to a number of small stations. These had various configurations and often included a passenger shelter, flag station, water tower, siding, occasionally a section house and bunkhouse, even a cattle loading platform. Today, the station buildings have all faded into history, and the only water available is from a farmer's irrigation system. After the hard climb up the grade, the 2141 is in need of water. She crosses the pastures and fields above Westwold, slowly rolling to a stop to replenish the tender. Passing through Falkland today, it is difficult to believe that this small farm town emerged as a company town from 1925 to 1928. The discovery of almost pure gypsum on the mountainside above the village called for a railway to make it exploitable. Beyond Falkland, the line continues to follow the narrow valley of the Salmon River on an easy downgrade for some 6 miles until it crosses the river on a trestle span at Sweetsbridge. Traveling along the steep sides of Moffat Mountain, majestic scenic vistas continue. The train climbs on to reach O'Keefe and the final highway crossing. She then begins her sharp descent to Armstrong and the Okanagan Basin. Passengers detrain and spend an enjoyable 2 hours exploring Armstrong, getting a bite to eat and, along with other curious onlookers, admiring the statuesque 2141. A sharp blast of the steam whistle signals passengers to return to the train, and soon the 2141 is underway on the homeward leg of the trip back to Kamloops. So what does the future hold? The Kamloops Heritage Railway hopes to build upon the region's railroad and cultural history. A proposed Heritage Railway theme park containing a restored turntable and roundhouse museum will become a distinct and dynamic stopping point for visitors traveling through and to Kamloops.
The Heritage Rail theme park will position Kamloops as one of the most comprehensive heritage rail destinations in all of Western Canada, if not the Pacific Northwest. Not just an operating steam locomotive, but an archive, an ongoing restoration facility, and a museum that would be a cross-section of not just one particular railway, but all the railways, including the history of the building of the railways.
Of course, the daily work of maintenance on the 2141 locomotive, the constant refurbishment of new cars and other railway-related memorabilia will keep a new generation of volunteers going for years to come.
I'm the kid on the block. Old Connie there, he's 92, 91. And Al is 75, 80. A whole bunch of guys like that.
That's if the old ones will let them. The Kamloops Heritage Railway, moving forward into the past.